What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. As always, I'm your host, Rich Quinones. A ton of NFL stuff to get into. We got some breaking news, by the way, regarding Michael Irvin. We'll run through the gamut of the Super Bowl injury report. Our NFL Insider kind enough to join us on a Wednesday as we get over the hump, Lloyd Vance. And we're a couple days away from Super Bowl 57. I like the backdrop. It's a little more calming effect. Okay, we can live with that. But how are you, my friend?
Doing great. I'm excited for Sunday, but a lot of analysis into this one. Obviously, being from the Philadelphia area, everybody is really pumped. But you have to look at this matchup objectively, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, we'll get into also Roger Goodell, a couple of the comments that he said. I don't know if you saw this, though, coming down, and it's still the details are a little bit fuzzy and hazy. Apparently, Michael Irvin was asked to leave the hotel in Arizona, took him off the coverage. And again, this is just, these are all apparent, so to speak, had a 40 to 45 second conversation with a woman. And after that, I guess that was enough where NFL Security, NFL Network, they came and they asked him to leave. He's been pulled off the coverage for this week. And, they asked him if he was drinking or not, and he wasn't recalling something. And clearly it shows on camera that he was speaking to this woman. You hate to assume, I don't want to do that. Maybe it was someone that worked for the network. Maybe it was someone that worked in the NFL, but that's going to be a story that's, it's going to be a big story today and most likely tomorrow and really going into the game because he was part of that coverage crew with the NFL Network. Actually, when you think about it, two networks and ESPN as well.
Right, Q, and he's always had the full support of Jerry Jones, who I think a lot of times props him up for these jobs and helps him get them. And unfortunately, Michael Irvin throughout his career has always found himself in some pretty bad situations. So, we'll wait for all the full details to come out. But obviously, the NFL Network, they want to make sure that their coverage is squeaky clean. I'll just put it that way. There's been other guys that they have stepped away from. And, Michael Irvin, he's going to have to deal with whatever happened there. So it's an unfortunate situation. But eventually, when the game start talking about the game and the game's played, everybody will kind of put this on the back burner.
Yeah, just want to clarify one thing. So no longer will make his Friday guest appearances on First Take. ESPN spokesperson said won't be involved in NFL Network or ESPN Super Bowl coverage this week following the brief exchange with a woman in a hotel lobby. And like I said, 40, 45 seconds, it had to be enough where something transpired. But listen, this is nothing new with Michael Irvin, to be quite honest with you. So we kind of went down that rabbit hole in the past with him. All right. So the game within the game, I want to get into that in a second. But Roger Goodell spoke today, kind of like the State of the Union, and a couple of things that stood out. He talked about the officiating, which that's kind of where I wanted to go. He's come out and basically said it's never been better. I listen, I have to go back and I have to listen to every single solitary question that was fired off, but I would have proposed to him, listen, if you're going to, okay, here it is, quote, I don't think it's ever been better. Like, how do you not hammer away at him and say, well, listen, I've got exhibit A, B, C, and D, and he's come out and he was pretty strong. I think this is, let me see if I can pull this up for you.
Are we losing people from the field to the booth? There are some that never even officiated on the NFL field. And so we didn't lose anyone. May have lost them from our office, but we didn't lose them from officiating on the field. Others are taking on that responsibility at the end of their careers. So I do not think that's a factor at all, zero. I think for us, when you look at officiating, I don't think it's ever been better in the league. There are over 42,000 plays in a season. Multiple infractions could occur on any play. Take that out or extrapolate that. That's hundreds, if not millions of potential fouls. And our officials do an extraordinary job of getting those. Are there mistakes in the context of that? Yes. They are not perfect, and officiating never will. But we've also had, obviously, replay and other aspects that help us address those issues to make sure they're not something that we can't correct on the field. communications between our office.
I heard enough of him. That's a little bit from Goodell today. So
So-
I don't know how he says it with a straight face. I mean, if anything, it's the elephant in the room. Everyone knows the officiating is extremely inconsistent. It's hit or miss. The expedited replay process, it failed miserably, i.e. in the NFC Championship game with the Smith catch, no catch, 49ers and the Eagles, Kansas City and Cincinnati in the AFC Championship game. So I understand the whole falling on the sword, protecting the shield, but I would have been more comfortable where he would have came out and said, look, it's never going to be perfect. Do we need to improve it? Should it be more consistent at times? I think that's open for discussion and debate. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that it's 100% perfect. Like I could have, he won't even acknowledge it. And I understand why not, but still, we see it with our own eyes every Sunday.
Yeah, and he's paid $50 million or more from the league to kind of espouse whatever they want him to, and it's incredible. You know, it kind of goes back to that Saints Rams play that, you know, the pass interference that was not called, and you know, they acted like, oh, there was nothing wrong here, nothing to see, and it's just incredible over and over again how they get things wrong and they just will not admit it. You know, they hold players and even some coaches that get in trouble, their feet to the fire in terms of fessing up to situations, and the NFL needs to do the same thing. They got to fix this thing. You know, never been better. That's a bit strong. You know,
do you believe the refs kind of are the soldiers and they get their marching orders, right? And as you mentioned, as long as the owners are happy, then they know Roger Goodell is doing the job, so to speak, right? And you kind of turn a blind eye to this.
Yeah, and they're always going to stick together. You know, they're tight. You know, in the NFL, we know it's all about money and the revenue driven every year and the billions of dollars. And you know, it's a situation where they got to fix it. You know, and I always say start with grading these officials and making them full-time employees where they have to study a certain amount of tape and just get better at their job overall. So it's a very bad situation. Obviously, Goodell's going to cover it up as best as he can, but everyone knows that they have to clean up these officiating situations. And when you talk about that Smith 9 catch, obviously early in the game, but you know, it was just terrible. And they say they don't have the replay, and then everyone knows what really happened, but no one's doing anything about it. And it's just a bad look.
I want to also, before we get into the game, Lloyd, I want to kind of pick your brain, no pun intended, all jokes aside with this. BU finds CT in nearly 92% of ex-NFL players that have been studied. I think this will also be a storyline going up to this, leading up to this game. And you have Antonio Brown, who has come out and basically said, look, I've got CT from James Harrison. Now, again, we'd have to go look at every single solitary player when the Steelers played, or when he was, when he played for other squads. You know, maybe it was in practice. I don't know, because they were teammates at one time or another, I believe. But be that as it may, I'm wondering if this will always be a lingering problem in the league just because of the violent nature of the sport. And I can't for the life of me ever seeing the NFL turning into what we saw at the Pro Bowl flag football. It's just not going to happen. So again, this is almost like, how do you remedy this? How do you fix this? Is it fixable?
Yeah, and you know, that's probably a question for the commissioner, competition committee, but I'll take the swing at it. You know, Q, it's just something you're never going to be able to litigate out to the game. You know, it's a collision sport where people are going to get tackled, and that's just the nature of it. And you know, you're going to see youth numbers go down even further. I know a lot of people, after that concussion movie came out with Will Smith and spelled a lot of things out and showed what happened to Mike Webster and other older veteran guys. You know, it definitely alarmed a lot of parents and people. But you know, there are always going to be young men that want to play football and want to play at a high level, and they're going to take this risk, and it's always going to be out there. Unfortunately, with CT, you can't find out truly about it until a person is deceased, and then they study the brain of it. And you know, it's just never going to be flag football. Obviously, the Pro Bowl. That was a smart move because you don't want to see anybody get hurt in a glorified all-star game. But there's always going to be hits, and there's always going to be questionable hits. Did he lead with the head, etc.? But it's something that they have to look at. And when you see these guys as they get older, having problems from playing the game, it's definitely heartbreaking. So it's something we're going to have to look at going forward.
Yeah, and they've already discussed over the last several years, right? Fixing the helmet or coming up with a more softer cushion inside to limit the trauma, the head trauma. But to your point, it's a violent game. That's never going to change. And I think that's sometimes why we see a lot of these flags, because they're trying to cut down on some of these injuries. But I've always offered this up: eliminate Thursday Night Football. They won't do that because of this. So, we're just kind of dancing around in circles when it comes to that. All right. So the game Sunday, right around 6:30-ish in Arizona, Eagles and Kansas City. I'm trying to figure out paths of victories for both sides. Kansas City, I think the best news to come out is that Patrick Mahomes seems to be 100% running around, putting weight on that foot, on that ankle. Won't be compromised like we saw. It's amazing what a week or two and a lot of therapy and a lot of rest does. So that's huge news. Now, is it enough to move the line with the Eagles at 1.5? No, I don't believe so. But with all that being said, I still believe this game is going to be won and lost in the trenches. And if the Eagles can dominate the Chiefs like they did against the 49ers, then to me, I don't believe this will be a competitive football game. Now, we can kind of take it a step further, but at first glance, knowing that Patrick Mahomes is quoted 100%, that's really gotta, I think, just kind of make the fan base, the Kansas City fan base right now, kind of take a collective sigh of relief, because you can't have him out there compromised.
Yeah, and this is the biggest game this season, so he's obviously going to want to put himself out there. And it's good news to hear that he's been through physical practices and he feels well enough to play in this game and not get shot up and everything. So it's going to be exciting in that regard. And Q, when you talk about breaking it down, X's and O's in terms of this matchup, I always stick to my tried and true tenets in terms of football. Who's going to be able to run the ball the best? Who's not going to turn the football over? And who is, who's going to be able to just dictate the pace of the game. Yeah. So you definitely want to run the ball and not turn it over, and also create pressure on a quarterback. So when I look at the Eagles up front, their offensive line is way better than the Kansas City Chiefs at this point. They're just a mauling group in terms of rushing yards. They were one of the top 5 teams in the National Football League. They're going behind Kelsey and Mulata and the rest of those guys there. So I would think the Eagles are going to be able to run the football, but you also got to wonder, is Shane Steichen, who's their offensive coordinator, does he get too pass happy? There was a game that I attended at the end of the season against the Saints, and the Eagles just threw the ball over and over again with Gardner Minshew when they should just leaned on their running game. So, that's going to be a key factor in the game. And we talk about turnovers. The Eagles are +9 in terms of turnovers. Yep. So they're able to create turnovers. And then also when they get turnovers, they're getting points off it. And then unfortunately, KC is a -5 in terms of turnover. So that's going to be an interesting thing. And then lastly, I'll leave this, in terms of sacks and the quarterback. So Patrick Mahomes has only been sacked 24 times, as opposed to the Eagles quarterbacks being sacked 41 times. So can the Eagles vaunted pass rush, everybody's talking about Hassan Reddick and the rest of those guys, can they get to Patrick Mahomes? I know Orlando Brown could possibly be a weakness on their line, and some teams have taken advantage of his inability to protect the edge there. So it's going to be an interesting matchup, but some things that throw out there. But I expect it to be a good game. I think that Mahomes will have his say, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
You also got to consider the wideouts, right? Kansas City's banged up a little bit. You think Kelsey's going to get the ball a lot over the middle. They'll double team him. Maybe you have a spy linebacker on him. I think it opens up for Pacheco, the kid out of Vineland and Rutgers, right out of Cumberland County, South Jersey. I think he's going to get 18 to 20 touches. But Mahomes, to me, for Kansas City, is the X factor. If he starts running around doing Mahomes-like things, then I believe it could be a long day, a long evening for the Philadelphia Eagles. And conversely, Jalen Hurts seems to be 100%. I don't think we saw enough in that Giant game. I don't think we had to see that much in the 49ers game with the shoulder and the injury and whatnot. So I look at this. If they can establish the run and win that battle in the trenches in the line of scrimmage, I think there's going to be opportunities for their running backs to exploit Kansas City's defense. I really do. And I look for guys like Sanders to probably hit over on his rushing total. And I think that opens everything up where they're going to take some shots down the field, because A.J. Brown, he's your 50-50 ball guy, right? He throw it up and let me contest, let me go after it. And I think that's where the Eagles are going to have the edge. Defensively, they're just better. They're flat out better than Kansas City. So if they can start to get them homes a little bit, force those quick 3-and-outs, shorten the field, flip the field, then I think they'll do damage. And the other point too is Kansas City has a horrible red zone defense. I mean, it's not good. And the Eagles actually have one of the best red zone offenses in the NFL. I think they're right around a 67% clip. So we might see some points in this one early on. But I do believe if they start to get to Mahomes, it will reek, and it will almost be a repeat of what Tampa did a couple years ago, where they just would not allow him to get out of the pocket and do what he does best, and that's make plays with his arm and his leg.
Yeah, and the Chiefs, after that Super Bowl loss, they went and got Creed Humphrey, the great center from Alabama, and they also brought in Thuney over from the Patriots. They tried to fix that line a lot after that situation. And you're right, Patrick Mahomes. Yes, he was only sacked 24 times, but if you can get that pressure on him, it totally changes their game plan. Obviously, the Chiefs want to throw the football. They're first in the NFL, averaging 305 yards passing per game. And then you pointed out a very key thing there, Q. In terms of points allowed, KC's defense is ranked 20th. They allow 22 points per game. So you can get after this group. And L'Jarius Sneed's coming back from that concussion. How healthy is him? Obviously, when you're looking at the Chiefs defense, you've got to block Chris Jones. They're all pro defensive lineman there. And then they're going to try to get Frank Clark off the edge. So there are two guys you got to keep your eye on. But the Eagles have a variety of guys that they can line up and rush the passer with, in terms of Sue, Reddick, and all the rest of the guys. Everybody knows he had, I think, 70 sacks or so this season, and they're going to get after him. So, definitely Andy Reid is going to have to get that ball out of Mahomes' hand quickly. And then you pointed out a key thing to me, Q, as well. Kelsey has got to be the X factor for them. The Eagles across the middle field with Epps and TJ Edwards and Kazir White, they're not the best in terms of coverage. So those linebackers and the safety that I named, they can be had in terms of coverage. So I think that's where they will try to attack them. But will Mahomes have enough time to get Kelsey down the field and make some big plays?
Where are you right now when we look at Andy Reid? He's been there. He's done it. He's won before, obviously, with Kansas City. We know about his track record with the Eagles. And then you have a younger coach who, I go on the record, I'm not the biggest fan of his antics, and Nick Sirianni. I honestly, it just rubs me the wrong way, man. And I would tell you this, if he was a Giant head coach, I'd say the same thing. Like, I don't just, what the hell have you done in your NFL career? Yeah, I get it. You're coaching in the Super Bowl right now. I totally understand that, but the antics, I can kind of do it out. That aside, you have to give the nod and the edge right now to Andy Reid, who's a veteran guy, 20 plus years. He's been around the block. He's been in these moments. He's coached in these moments on the biggest stage with a ton of pressure on him. Now, he's also had the benefit of having some pretty good quarterbacks in his time. Now you flip and you go to the other sideline in Sirianni. Do you believe that he'll still coach the same way he's coached for 16, 17, 18 weeks? Young guy, hasn't been there before. And like I said, did he really have to do much against the Giants, do much against San Francisco? Not really.
Yeah, and you have the older staff, the veteran staff, and you can't forget about Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator for Kansas City Chiefs, who was the architect of the defense in 2007 that shut down Tom Brady and the undefeated Patriots. So, Spags definitely will have a game plan. And you're right, the Eagles, young group, they have a lot of bravado over there. And it starts with the head coach, and has he been there before? No. And there may be situations where he may not have seen something and he, maybe all new to him. I'll just put it that way. So it's going to be real interesting to see if he does any adjustments on the fly, because that's how good teams win. They're going to make the adjustments at halftime. Andy Reid off a bye. We know that he's very good. And this is basically a bye week. And he's studying. He's probably been in the bunker studying the Eagles offense over and over again, and as well as their defense, trying to find the weaknesses. So it's going to be a very good matchup. And when I look at the Eagles, they're probably going to try to say, okay, we're much like the Rams when they went there. McVay was the genius at that season, and that team was a young group of coaches, and they found a way to win. We're going to see what they have. This should be a very interesting matchup. So, I'll get my pick in a few minutes, but definitely have to wonder when the big lights come on. We've seen it before. Some of these quarterbacks and younger coaches have kind of froze out there.
A Wednesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. Rich Quinones here, our NFL insider and correspondent Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us as he typically does every week throughout the football season and as well on the off season. Follow me on Twitter at RichQ on Q, IG, and of course the YouTube channel. And don't forget every Saturday 9 to 9:30 TV 14-1 in Delmarva. All right, let me give you a couple player props. You tell me where you're at with these, Lloyd. Miles Sanders. Over 54.5 rushing yards. Now, on the surface, we look at the Chiefs. Okay, they appear to be a little solid against the run, but they rank 8th in yards allowed per game at $1.07, but 18th in yards allowed per carry, 4.5. Sanders, 45.5 rushing yards. Over or under?
I would think he's going to be able to beat that number, Q. But the key thing will be Gainwell. Gainwell has come along this offseason, and he's been stealing some carries from Sanders, and he's moving the ball as well. And then also the health of Jalen Hurts' shoulder. Can they do a lot of those read options? And he have about 10 runs or more. So that's going to be an interesting thing. But I'd say right now, I'd say Sanders are the over when you're talking about only 45 yards or so.
Yeah, I mean, he might get that in the first half alone. All right, let me give you a couple more. Patrick Mahomes. This is per BetMGM. Under 19.5 rushing yards. So you're laying a little juice here, minus 110. Again, if we go on the premise, he's still, quote, nursing the ankle injury, extra week off, couple extra days. I can see this hitting the over, and I'll tell you why. I think you're going to get some third down plays where the safeties in the corners, I think they're going to drip back into coverage, and that might open it up. And you'll see the 6-7 yard. All you need is a couple of those to hit 19.5 rushing yards. So over under on that.
Yeah, Q, that's an interesting one. I immediately thought I got to go to the under in terms of him coming off that high ankle sprain. But you're talking about, there could be one busted play where they have no contain, and then he gets out and he gets a pretty long first down. So, I'll say maybe he gets about 22 or so. So yeah, I'll go over, but barely.
All right, no kneel downs. You don't want that. All right, Travis Kelce, anytime touchdown. That's minus 125. Listen, we know now with the wide receivers being banged up, he's been dominant. He goes across the middle. Eagles have had problems in the past. It seems a lot of teams do covering the tight ends. He scored 3 touchdowns total in the past 2 games. And they were first scores. They were his first score since week 12. So do we say Travis Kelce gets a Super Bowl touchdown, maybe a little goal line scoop shovel pass from Patty Mahomes?
Yeah, Q, with Andy Reid, he's going to be creative, and he's going to find a way to get his star tight end in the end zone, whether he takes a snap or, has a short pass or something like that. But I definitely do like that bet there. I think that Kelce will definitely have a catch, and then you'll definitely see him celebrate. How he likes to dance and have a good time. It's going to be interesting.
I like this one. Jerick McKinnon, over 23.5 receiving yards, minus 115. So we know the Eagles have kind of been stingy with the pass defense. We know this. Andy Reid knows it. So they got to get creative. So I can see maybe a couple little bubble screens here and there. 23.5. What do you think?
Wow.
By the way, he's gone over in 10 of 19 games this season, including 4 straight games from week 14 to 17 with that number.
Yeah, and he had a great end of the season run, but in the playoffs, he's kind of disappeared in his offense. Now it's going to be interesting to see if they keep an eye on him. But, you always think of James White and all those great Super Bowls he had for the Patriots, catching those short passes. And I know the Eagles in particular, once you get past contain and a lot of those little screen passes and wheel routes to the running back, they can do some damage. So Pacheco does not have that great of hands, and this is where I think he'll get McKinnon involved. So I definitely think he'll beat that number.
Here's one for the Eagles. AJ Brown, longest reception over 25.5, a little juiced again, -115 at Caesar Sportsbook. Pretty much quiet during this postseason. Again, because the Eagles were in control of both those playoff games, those routes. He's managed 26 receptions over 20 yards, 6 over 40 in the regular season. And the one thing we know about the Kansas City Chiefs defense, especially that secondary, they are susceptible to the big play. So me personally, I think you might see play action to start the game if the Eagles get the ball and they take a shot down the field. I mean, I see over 25.5. I can definitely see that. And let's also consider too, the yards after the catch.
Yeah. Now, Q, another factor in there is, Jalen Hurts' shoulder. How healthy is he? And in the championship game, their longest catch was the one to Smith that really wasn't a catch. So,
right.
You got to wonder, can he drive that football down the field? They kind of kept everything quiet in terms of practices. He hasn't thrown a lot of deep passes. So, surprisingly, I think I would go with the under there. And that's going to be interesting to see if he can hit that play action and get the ball out of his hands.
All right, give me one player from each team, the X factor in your estimation.
In terms of the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, I will go with, I know Kelsey's the easy pick here, so I'll go with him. And I just think he's got to get open over the middle. He's got to make some big plays. I'd like to see him have 7 or more catches in terms of just breaking this game open. So he's going to be Mahomes' main guy that he's leaning on. And then obviously for the Philadelphia Eagles, the X factor has got to be Hassan Reddick. Once again, Reddick is a guy. He's a game wrecker, and you saw that in the NFC Championship game. He got the big sack. He knocks quarterback out the game, gets the fumble, and he's playing at a defensive player of the year level. So definitely Hassan Reddick is the guy for the Eagles. But it's going to be interesting. Hurts, he's got that bullseye on his shoulder. Can he get it done out there? So it's going to be a very interesting game.
All right, who you got?
Well, Q, I've been back and forth on this one, and I know all my Eagles cousins up this way, they're all saying I'm a hater and oh, you're an analyst, huh? But my thing is, when I look at the Eagles, I think this team just seems to have that luck running with them that they had the same 5 years ago. So I think they find a way to win this one. I know the over/under is right now 50.5. So I think the Eagles will pull this one out. It's going to be a very close game. I say the Eagles win 27-24.
Well, that's not hating.
Exactly. You tell them, they always say that I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid. So I got to look
to be objective.
Rationally.
All right. So your confidence level with that, are you deflated or are you flated up that the Eagles are going to win? Flated up means you're pretty confident that they win this game and they cover the nut.
Yeah, I'm about 50-50, but I'll say I'm inflated. I think that they're going to find a way to win this one. And Jalen Hurts silences a lot of his critics, and he finds a way to make some big plays and possibly run the football. And the thing is that Kansas City defense, they have a lot of inability to stop people. Yeah. And I think the Eagles will take advantage of that. And, that everybody in Philly here will be planning their next parade. So I think the Eagles win this one, but a lot of people are saying, oh, it's a blowout. They got this one, after, especially what happened with the Giants and the Niners. Yeah. They're feeling really confident, but yeah, I think it's going to be a back and forth game.
Listen, I hear what you're saying, and you're confident with the Duke, so you're flated up with the Duke. I can live with that. I get the sense it might be a blowout. I still need another day or two to just kind of wrap my head around it. If the Eagles win, we would assume it's because Jalen Hurts has a big game, right? I mean, typically the MVP it's pretty much more times than not going to be the quarterback. If, let's just say, Jalen Hurts goes 18 of 36, $186, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and a fumble, and they lose the game, does that in any way, shape, or form factor into Jeffrey Lurie and the Eagles brass decision in if they're going to give him a long-term contract? Because Lurie already said from this point on, it's all gravy. In essence, hey, would love the kid to go out and have a big time game and they win, but you almost get the sense that it's not going to affect their decision making. But I'm asking you.
Yeah, Q. I think they've already made their decision in terms of Jalen Hurts in the future team. He's their leader. He got them to the Super Bowl, and they're all puffing their chests out because they picked him high in the second round, and everybody thought he shouldn't have been that high of a player, and he's turned out into being an MVP type candidate. So, I think, like you said, it's kind of gravy to the Eagles, and they're going to give him his contract. It's not like the situation in Baltimore where that's going to get very contentious down there. But I think the Eagles right now, they're willing to pay Jalen Hurts. Now, does it get up to the 40 million plus range and the Kyler Murray contract and Aaron Rodgers contract? I'm not sure there, but he definitely is going to get a very good contract. And he's kind of earned it fighting his way up after being not being a first round draft pick.
Yeah, and Lamar Jackson, it appears they're 100 million apart, and then Aaron Rodgers is going to go dark for about 3 or 4 days to figure out what he wants to do. I mean, hey, whatever works for you, man, right? I mean, if you need to go sit in a dark hole somewhere and turn off the phone and kind of become one with yourself, more power to you. We'll talk a lot more off season next week. He, of course, is our guy. Lloyd Vance does a wonderful job covering the NFL, great follow on social media, excellent insight. And he changed the backdrop because he knew it bothered me. He knew it affected me. He understands I am a beach person. We're going to have to get a little bit of sunset going forward, but I like the water. It's a calming effect for me. But
nice.
All right, my friend, your family won't get on you when we repost this one. Excellent insight as always appreciate it. Enjoy the game Sunday. We'll recap everything. We'll start to look ahead already to the offseason next week.
All right, Q. Thanks for having me on.
You got it, pal.